Are you a chiropractor with a struggling practice, having a hard time finding and keeping patients? Is your staff falling short of expectations? I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer, and DC Trainings has the answers that you need. So tune in now and find out how. Hello, everybody. Welcome to DC Trainings. I'm Dr. Scott Sawyer. Top of the morning to you. Good afternoon to you, depending on where you are out there in the world. It's great to be with you today. And we're going to talk about our next section in Module 3 of DC Trainings, which is the Report of Findings module. And we're in week 7, so we're moving along fairly quickly as you know, with each of these topics. So I trust you've been following along. I trust you've been gathering valuable information that you can incorporate into your practice as it relates to the Report of Findings. But today is specifically about the insurance forms and basically the connection between your patient's care and what you're recommending for them at the Report of Findings, and how do you tie that in with their insurance. So we're going to go through a couple different types of insurance, but it's an important aspect. And I want to frame this first, because put yourself in the mind of a patient who works hard, and they go to work and they pay a lot of money for their health insurance. I mean, health insurance is not cheap anymore. And not to digress too far off topic, but of course, part of that is because the whole system driving healthcare is based not on healthcare, it's based on sickness care, right? When is it that we enter the healthcare environment? When is it that we seek out healthcare generally as a citizen in our country? It's when our health is gone, right? So the what they call healthcare is more of a sick care system, meaning that you go there when your health is gone and you try to reestablish your own health again, which medicine saves lives every day. So I don't dispute that and the quality of that, but it does, in that context, you can hear how that's different than the context of chiropractic care and the paradigms that we live in within chiropractic. Where am I going with that? Where I'm going with that is that when your patients work hard and they pay a lot of money for their health insurance, they want to use it. If I went to a doctor's office and I had my health insurance, which I paid a lot of money for, I probably would want to know, is my doctor able to utilize that health insurance? So I know sometimes, and I know one of the doctors on the call today, I won't bring her name into it, but but she has an all cash practice and just doesn't want to deal with that, which is fine. And I support you in that. And obviously we have systems within DC Trainings to train you on how to set your practice up in a way that caters to that approach. I just want to add to that, because if I'm a hardworking patient with insurance benefits that I want to utilize, I'm probably going to seek out a doctor who can utilize those benefits with me, right? So it's nice to have this organized in a way that you can explain that to a patient and present your position to them in a way that is ultimately a win-win. They see the value in coming to see you as being greater than the value of just simply settling for what their insurance covers, or only going to a doctor which provides benefits through their insurance, which it may be a win-win in the same office. That's great, but we want to make sure that we create value. So today is about creating value around insurance forms. I know that's not the most exciting topic, but we want to create value so that our patients see the benefit of coming to see us and either utilizing their health insurance benefits or not utilizing it, but the value of coming to see us is greater than simply their insurance. Okay, so let's dive in and go through this topic here. And as always, as I'm going through this, if you have any questions, please just raise your hand. I'll be happy to chime in with you and answer any questions. Let me just open up a couple of little windows here so I have that correct. And so on my screen, you can see we are in week 7 of Module 3. We've covered a lot of information in this process. So we're coming in for a landing, right? We have one more week, and then we'll be jumping into the next module. And the next module will be on financial arrangements. That'll be on July 13th. And I want to really emphasize, if you're planning on attending in person, I need you to go on the website and RSVP in person to let us know that you're going to be there, right? We have to reserve seats, we have to get food, all of that. I see a lot of you have already selected that you want to just attend the seminar remotely, which I respect, and that's why we have it set up in that dynamic. But I need to know accurately which way you're going to go on that so that we know how to prepare. Okay, so so let's get into this insurance forms and talk about how to structure it in a way. And I tried to put this picture up just with a smile on my face because I want this to be a happy experience. I want this to be an encouraging, positive, uplifting experience, just like the whole presentation of your office, right? We're talking about serious terms here. We're talking about a potentially damaging condition in our patient's spine called a subluxation. And we want to make sure that they take that very seriously. In addition to that, we want to make sure that it's an uplifting, positive experience where they can say, oh, good. Even though, yes, I have a serious condition, I know that I'm in the right place. They know how to take care of me. And the direction that I'm going to go, if I am accepted as a patient here, is going to be a positive, long-term beneficial experience for me to protect my health and well-being for myself and my family, right? So we want to make sure that this has that positive experience, that positive vibe, that uplifting, nurturing, and I should say knowledgeable and professional presentation, right? We want this to come across as we know what we're talking about. We know how to handle this stuff. You're in good hands with us, right? So we want to make sure that we maintain that professionalism throughout this. All right, so let's talk about the different types of insurance and how to handle these. And actually, I may just jump over to the website quickly in just a moment because this is sort of a summary here, and I think we can get into the specific forms and cover that detail a little better right from the website. But just to set the stage, the first one is general insurance. With our general insurance, that's like, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare, all of these different insurances have set plans that employers purchase and then employees get those benefits, right? We want to let the patient know, and this is important. I'm going to open up my screen for a moment, that insurance is primarily aimed at getting you out of a crisis. They're not based on keeping you healthy. They're based on getting you out of a crisis, meaning that you're in a crisis right now. They provide certain benefits to help you through a transition period, but they're not going to keep you in that new level of health, right? If they really paid for wellness care, they'd be giving us coupons to go to the farmer's market and gym memberships, right? But they don't do that. There's no money in that for the insurance company. So they pay for this crisis. So we want to make sure that the patient understands that insurance is just a stepping stone to get you out of this crisis and into this other level of care. So let me go back to my screen, and I think we'll jump into, actually, I'm sorry. I think actually we're going to go back into that because I want to just break down these three. Sorry, I got into a little more detail. We'll get into that on the website, but I want to break down these three. So that's the most important with the general insurance. They need to understand it's a stepping stone to get to the place where they really want to be, which is health maintenance and ongoing care. The next is personal injury. With personal injury, you have to understand that the patient coming in was just in some type of an accident, probably an auto accident or a slip and fall, something like that, and they're hurt and they're injured and they want to just put this whole thing behind them, right? If they want to put it behind them, let's help them do that. But once again, let's understand and make sure they understand that in order to put that behind them, there's this stepping stone, right? The stepping stone is the initial corrective care that they need to resolve the effects of the injury and bring them to pre-injury status. Okay, I'm using those words carefully and talking slowly. If you're taking notes, you want to write that down, right? This is a stepping stone to take you to pre-injury status, which is where you were before this accident, right? So we want to make sure that we're making that absolutely clear. This is the stepping stone. We got to get you from point A to point B, but your care plan is not going to stop there. Your care plan has a point C and beyond in there, right? And it's all explained and built in. This is just the first part of that. So we want to make sure that they understand with personal injury that it's not over when you get them to pre-injury status and resolve the effects of the injury. That's the first stepping stone, right? Now let's jump into workers' comp. With workers' compensation, this means that the patient had a work-related injury for which their employer is responsible and liable to pay for whatever care they need that's reasonably necessary to bring them to a pre-injury status, right? It's not going to pay for all the lifetime care that they need forever. It's going to bring them to a pre-injury status. And that's it. That's the stepping stone. Okay. So these days with workers' comp, it's changed over the years, but in the current day and age with workers' compensation, there's usually a block of visits that are approved through the insurance company, the workers' comp carrier, and likely a claims adjuster within that, where they'll say, we're going to approve X number of visits based on this initial presentation that the patient has related to that injury. That initial presentation being, let's just say it's neck pain. So based on that neck pain, maybe the claims adjuster refers the patient over for 6 to 8 visits, or 6 visits, just 6 visits, or maybe it's 8 visits, or maybe there's a range. Either way, you want to make sure that you assign that care plan. Well, you assign those visits to the first part of their care plan. That's how I wanted to say that, because that's the first stepping stone. Now, it may be that there's more stepping stones within that bigger stepping stone. What do I mean by that? Well, let's suppose that the workers' comp case is limited to 24 visits. If you're in California, there's a limit of 24 visits per workers' comp injury as it relates to chiropractic care. Sometimes it can go beyond, just depending on the parameters of the case. But let's just use this arbitrary number of 24 visits. The patient is rarely referred in for all 24 visits right out of the gate, right? They come in and maybe they have 6 visits, and then you need to submit a request for more. In my town, a lot of times we'll get a referral directly from the primary care doctor, their primary doctor that's the PTP, the primary treating physician for that claim. That doctor will refer them to us for, say, 6 visits. And then we need to let them know the patient's doing better. They're not all the way better yet, though. And they'll send over an authorization for an additional 6 visits. And you kind of go through that initial stepping stone in these blocks of visits. So I just want to make sure you understand that, because these cases or your care plans or your patient's care plans need to be structured in a way that everybody understands this formula. Where are we going with this? What's happening in this initial part of your care? And then as it relates to our sort of tagline in DC trainings, which is lifetime care 1 year at a time. How does this relate to lifetime care 1 year at a time? Well, going back to where we started, this is a stepping stone in the process of getting them started on that long-term vision of maintaining or reaching and maintaining optimum health, right? So this is that first stepping stone. So regardless of whatever the insurance is, we want to know how to structure this in a way that it makes sense to the patient, and it follows the flow that doesn't jeopardize their insurance benefits, and it doesn't jeopardize the patient's results. Those two things are obviously the most important. The patient's results are the most important. And then the next up is we don't want to jeopardize their insurance benefits or jeopardize their care because the insurance benefits got in the way, right? So let's just make sure we have it structured correctly right from the start and create value, okay? I talked about that as a couple of times now. I brought up this word value, and I'll just read the screen because it says, with any case type, creating value will lead to a willingness to pay out of pocket, leading to longer retention and increased profits. So in that statement, you can see that we want to create this value. What does this mean from the patient's perspective? At my doctor's office, they know how to incorporate my insurance. They know how to maximize my benefits, meaning that they're utilizing my hard-earned dollars. And at the same time, they know how to combine that with getting me the best results, both short-term and long-term, so that I can reach my goals in terms of what I want to do in life, and I want to do it subluxation free, right? So we want to combine those things. And the more we create that value, the more the patient says, okay, and this is sort of the punchline of this. This is what we hope that the patient leaves the office saying to themselves or to their family, to their spouse, whoever, they maybe came with them to the report of findings. So glad I came here, because We're going to utilize my insurance benefits for what my insurance covers. But beyond that, I'm going to continue to get the results that I want and do the things that I want to do through continued care. And because that is so valuable to me, in order to basically receiving the care that I need so I can do the things that I want to do, I'm willing to pay out of my pocket to get that other part of my care, right? So that's where we want to go with this. We hope that that's the thought process or the conversation that's being had as they're leaving the office after the report of findings. So that's why we set it up in this way. Okay, so let's go back in our screen here. And let's see. So, oh, I'm sorry. And that gets us into our next week. So next week, we'll be talking about the reactivating new patient report of findings. So when a patient comes back in to see you, how do we approach that? And how do we not sound like a broken record every time they come back to see us? So let me jump over. I'm going to jump over to this other screen because I want to jump into the website with you and show you the materials that we have, because this will really tie in nicely with the flow of the PowerPoint that I just went through. So on the home page, you'll see this is our insurance forms. We have these documents here. I also have an introductory video that you can watch, and you can just open that up and check that out. I sort of recap what I've talked about here, but most importantly, let's go through these forms. So we're going to start up at the top, and let's see, I think I have it right here. Yeah. So this is the diagnosis list sample. On this page, I've circled some examples of sort of the most common diagnoses that we use. But I want to share this with you because this is really important from the standpoint that when a patient comes in, they want to have value for the care that you're providing. And part of that value will be created through your expertise and your knowledge and your professionalism around utilizing the insurance that they work so hard to pay for, right? So having this document clearly defined is important. Now, I want to share some systems with you too, because in my office, I mean, we see a lot of patients. Yesterday, we saw 7 new patients yesterday. Saw well over 150 patients. I mean, and I'm not saying that to brag. I just want you to see, like, I walk my talk. I'm in practice just like you. I want to save the planet with chiropractic care along with you. And I want to make sure that we're taking care of as many people as we can. So we have to have systems in place to make that goal become a reality. So on the diagnosis form, I've just circled some real common ones, right? We've got the S13-101, that's a subluxation unspecified in the cervical. There's also cervical disc degeneration. There's a thoracic subluxation with segmental dysfunction in the thoracic spine, subluxation unspecified in the lumbar spine with some disc degeneration in the lumbar. So there's 5 diagnoses right there that relate to this patient. So I want to explain this flow for you, because one of the things that I've been sharing with you is that in my office, I have hired a company to provide what we call a virtual assistant. And this is an off-site CA. It's not like some person in another country that doesn't speak English or anything. This is an actual off-site person that we hire to take the new patient information that we gather on the first visit. We scan it, we store it in Platinum. In the Platinum, that's the program, the software that we use for the office, Platinum Systems. I think Dr. Knitsch, you're on the call. You might use that too. I know Dr. Davis, you use it. Anyways, we love Platinum Systems, but we scan it into the patient's profile within Platinum. So there's a folder called Scan Documents, or a button for Scan Documents in Platinum. We store those in there. Well, what's in there? The patient's intake forms and their diagnosis form, right? At the end of the day, that gets scanned in for all of our new patients for the day. After we've closed down, we've shut the office off, our virtual CA, which is not technically virtual, our CA that's remote, logs into our system, goes into Platinum, pulls up those scanned documents, and finishes the entire profile. Puts in the diagnosis, puts in the service codes, puts in the subluxation listings, because those were on a paper that we filled out as we were examining the patient. That's all set up there. And then when we come in the next morning, that profile is completely ready to go. The patient could walk in the next morning while we were all sleeping. That was created and done. And when they come walking in, their whole file is ready to go. And we welcome them in and bring them back for their adjustment, right? So it's really a streamlined way. Now, I'm going to go back to my screen. Why did I tell you that whole story? If you're interested in learning more about it, let me know. I can connect you with the company that we hired to do this. But I want to just share with you this, because when we fill this out, it's done quickly. So the patient comes in, they have their examination. If we take x-rays, there's the x-rays. We're looking at the x-rays. We're looking at the results of the examination. And on the spot, we fill out two things. What we're recommending for this patient, that's the care plan worksheet. And two, if it's applicable, because if it's a cash patient and there's no insurance, we don't need to do this. But if it's a insurance patient, we fill out the diagnosis, right? Now, if you want to use this form even for a cash patient, just to cover yourself and document your findings, you can simply come down here and check off wellness or maintenance visit. This is a code that it's a service code, actually. It's not a diagnosis code, but it's a service code. And it actually specifically says this is a wellness visit. It should not be construed as billable to insurance. It should not be reimbursable from insurance. And so for those of you who want to have real accurate, solid documentation, even for your cash files, you can use this form to document what the quote diagnosis is. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but at least in the state of California, I know this to be true. They don't require an actual diagnosis for us to take care of a patient. The Board of California requires the results of an analysis. So what that means is that you can analyze the patient, you can evaluate the patient, you can palpate the patient, you can find the subluxations, and then instead of issuing a diagnosis, if you choose not to do that, you can issue your results of your analysis. And there's a code that goes with that so that it's documented in the file correctly. So anyways, a little bit of a sidebar, but if you choose to use that, you can. Let me go back to sharing my screen. And that's on there for you. I actually just got word from somebody that code has been updated. So when I had created this form, it was still the Z00.8. I think there's a new code, and I think it's an S. I don't have it committed to memory yet. So if you need that, let me know, and I'll be happy to get it for you. But that code, I think, has been updated to a new one. Anyways, that's all filled out, right? It's documented. That's our diagnosis. Okay. Now I want to jump over to this next form, and this is the insurance verification. Now, once again, I'm pretty excited about this whole outsourcing of some of the duties that are not patient facing, right? Anything we can outsource that saves money, that's a great thing for the business overall. And it's less time on my staff that are working in the office that are directly working with patients. So we outsource our insurance verification to a company. And I've shared his name with you many times. His name's Robert Remian. He does Chironet billing, and he will do the insurance verifications for us. So once again, all we do is scan the insurance card of the patient that the patient brought in. We scan the insurance card into their Platinum profile. Robert can connect in remotely, grab that information from the patient's profile, verify the benefits, and then and that's with this form right on the screen. He'll fill this out and he'll drop it right back into the patient's folder before the report of findings, so that when the patient comes back for their report of findings, this is all done. It's ready to go. My CA just goes in. Oh, the patient's John Smith is here for his report of findings. Great. Let's pull up the forms that we need. Oh, there's his insurance verification done. We'll print that out. And then during the report of findings, we can go over the benefits with the patient. So it's just another streamlined way of having that efficiency in your practice, right? And it creates value because, and I want to go back to this, because when your patient shows up for their appointment and they see an office that's professional, they're detail oriented, they're organized, they're ready to go, what happens to their value for being able to come to all their appointments and do the exercises that you recommend and refer other people to your office and pay out of pocket when necessary because their insurance is limited, which almost all insurance is limited these days. So it's just a nice way to, again, build that value as we're taking care of our patients. So that's the insurance verification. Let's jump over to personal injury. And this is something that I want to emphasize also, because with personal injury, we did some slipping and checking in my office. I'm in practice just like you. BJ Palmer called it slipping and checking. We found a little subluxation in my office in the corner. It was back there. It was all dusty. We pulled it out, had to dust it off, get it adjusted, and make sure it was streamlined. um, so this, what was happening was when the patients were coming in with a personal injury case, we were asking them to fill out this information and bring it to their next appointment. And I want to share this story with you because this is, again, about efficiency and building value. So when the patient would come back to their next appointment for the report of findings, they would bring that paperwork with them. Well, what we found was we didn't really know what the parameters of this personal injury case were until the patient came back, which was unfortunate. And I'll play it out in two ways. Let's suppose that the patient that came in, somebody rear-ended them, and they were in this accident. It wasn't their fault. So the other party's insurance is responsible to pay. Your patient does not have med pay, so their insurance will not pay, and they didn't actually get the insurance information from the other party. So if you don't know that until the next visit, then when the patient comes back for their report of findings, and you have to say, well, unfortunately, if you don't have the insurance from the person that hit you and your insurance doesn't cover this, you don't have insurance from your automobile accident to cover the care that you need. And yet, so now we have to verify your insurance. That could take another day. We have to, or you have to pay out of pocket, which could be a shock if they were expecting differently. So what we have found, and I want to go back to my screen in terms of this system, we've found that the best thing to do is to get all this information completed on the first visit. And I know I'm preaching to the choir for some of you. Some of you probably didn't run into that little snafu that we ran into, but that's something we want to avoid. So on the first visit, this page must be filled out in its entirety. If your patient doesn't have the information with them, what we do now is we sit the patient down at the office on their first visit. We hand them a phone and ask them to contact their insurance right there and get those benefits and get that form filled out. So there's actually two of them. There's this one, which, as I mentioned about MedPay, that's right on this form down here. But there's a second one as well, and that's the notice of doctor's lien, right? Very important form right here for any personal injury cases. If your patient doesn't have an attorney representing them, and you don't have a signed lien, and then you provide the care to the patient without them paying for it, you run the risk of not having your bill paid, right? You could take care of that patient and have what we call unintentional pro bono work done for the duration of that case. So we want to make sure that that's all dialed in and in place right from the start. So be sure to get these forms filled out on day one when they're in your office as a new patient. And again, that just comes across as being professional. It's creating value, and you're adding to that whole experience so that your patient is happy with their care and they get the best results. So that's the doctor's lien. Oh, I'm sorry. And let me just explain this form in its most basic parameters. So when the patient comes in and they have a personal injury case, if they were referred by an attorney, make sure that you get this form from the attorney's office, signed by the attorney, right? This is the acknowledgement of the attorney down here at the bottom, dated with their signature. And it says, the undersigned, being attorney of record for the above patient, does hereby agree to observe all the terms of the above and agrees to withhold sums, from any, my mouse is not lining up, oh, that's funny. Here we go. Withhold sums from any settlement. Okay. Really important, right? If the case settles and you, doctor, have gone way out on a limb, you've provided all this care, you've paid your staff to provide care, you've paid your rent to keep the office open, you've made all these payments to provide this great environment for your patient to receive the care that they need, you have to make sure that that bill is paid, or you're not going to be in business very long, right? So we want to make sure that the attorney signs this and that they return a copy to your office and you have that on file. Now, we've had it happen before where an attorney did sign the lien. So we went through the process I'm sharing with you. And then midstream in the case, for some reason, the attorney decided that they weren't going to represent the patient anymore. In other words, they withdrew from the case, right? So it's important that you have a good relationship with the attorneys that you're working with, or the attorneys that are representing the patients you're caring for. You want to have that good relationship so that they know that they're on the hook, and and they know that you know how to structure this the right way, right? Because at the end of the day, we want the patient to get the best results. We want to make sure that the charges for the services rendered are paid for. And in the case of personal injury, we want to maintain good relationships with our personal injury attorneys, right? Because they'll refer more cases to us. So that's a good way to go. All right, so let's, I think that wraps up that form. And I think this is a good time to just open up for questions too, because I'm back here on the home page. Let's see. I don't see any hands up actually, and I'm today's a little bit of a shorter topic, so we'll probably cut this up a little short, just because with insurance forms we just hammer right through it. But again, just to back up to where we started, just remember that when we set up these care plans, we want to make sure that this is a stepping stone, right? That when a patient comes in, you want to give your best recommendations for the care that they need to get the best results, both short term and long term. And when there's insurance involved, that becomes that first stepping stone. Now, I want to finish today with a nice cherry on top, because there's a couple of insurances that I've worked with now for a number of years, many years actually, that that have some fluctuations in the process that I just shared with you. And those two insurances are Medicare for seniors. Medicare is a great insurance. And then for other patients who are maybe financially challenged or having struggles financially, they can qualify for what's called Medicaid, or in California, it's Medi-Cal. So we'll talk about Medicare first. With Medicare, the recommendations, or I'm sorry, the visits that are deemed reasonable and necessary, I'm using my words carefully because that's the terms that they use. So reasonable and necessary, or usual and customary, is the way to define the fees for that. But when you're delivering care that's reasonable and necessary for a specific condition, Medicare will allot a certain number of visits for that. So let's use an example. Let's say a patient comes in with a lumbar subluxation, and for that, Medicare sees it as reasonable and necessary to provide 10 visits, or so let's say 12. I think it is 12 actually, but don't quote me on the number. Let's say that they see it as reasonable to see that patient for 10 visits relating to that diagnosis. So you submit the diagnosis, just like I showed you today. You see the patient for 12 visits. At the end of 12 visits, Medicare is going to deem it as unreasonable to continue caring for that patient based on that diagnosis. Okay, no problem, right? So there's another little piece I want to add, because when you first start taking care of that patient, in order to bill it to insurance, any insurance, you have to have what's called the date of onset. So the date of onset is usually the first day you saw the patient. It's the day that you made the diagnosis for that condition. And that term, date of onset, is really important as we're providing care for that patient. So let's say at that date of onset, you issued a diagnosis for which Medicare deems it reasonable and necessary to see the patient for 12 visits. At the end of 12, you have to stop that active diagnosis. That date of onset now that started the timeline has finished. So at this point, what do we have to do? Well, what we found the best thing to do is to turn off that active diagnosis and change the patient over to wellness. Once you put in wellness, and Medicare requires that you submit all the visits. You can't just stop billing. They even want to know if you see the patient and it's a wellness visit. They want to know, even though they know they won't pay for it. They don't pay for wellness care. They still want the visit submitted though. So you just change the diagnosis to a wellness diagnosis, or actually, I'm sorry, in the case of Medicare, it's a modifier that's added onto the diagnosis, or the diagnosis, or the service code. I'm sorry, I'm mixing the two. It's the service code gets the modifier, and that modifier lets the insurance know this visit is a maintenance visit. And they say, oh, okay, you're seeing the patient for maintenance. We're not going to pay for it. Carry on as you wish. We're not going to pay for it though. That's fine. So now you see that patient for a series of visits on wellness. The patient's paying directly. They understand the importance of continued care. They're willing to pay for it out of pocket. Now, fast forward, who knows how many visits, however long, the patient comes in one day with a flare-up. And for that flare-up, as I've taught you with DC trainings, they fill out what? An ouch form. When they fill out the ouch form, that alerts you, doctor, that there's a change in their condition, right? Maybe they came in with a low back problem And today they come in and it's been a couple of weeks since you finished that series of adjustments, and they say, my neck's hurting now. And it's on an ouch form. Well, that ouch form restarts the clock. So it's now a new, write this down, date of onset. So today is the 20th of June. That means that on June 20th, we have a new diagnosis and a new date of onset. And for that new diagnosis, and I'm kind of jumping in with little pieces here, but let's suppose going back to that example I used with the lumbar subluxation, and Medicare deems that subluxation as needing about 12 visits to resolve it. Well, if there's a subluxation in the neck now, Medicare is going to see that as a similar diagnosis, similar time frame. So based on that being a similarity, we could reasonably assume that Medicare is going to approve 12 visits for that new condition, or new, more importantly, date of onset. So we can see the patient for 12 visits relating to the new flare-up, and then we need to stop it again, don't we? Because that would be considered unreasonable to extend past what they consider to be reasonable and necessary for that condition. So we see them for 12 visits. We then change the diagnosis to a maintenance visit or a wellness visit, which Medicare doesn't pay for. And then we would continue to see them until there's some other change in their condition, which would issue a new date of onset and a new series of visits for which they would be paid for. Now, I know that's kind of deep in the weeds, but to recap that means that over a 12-month period of time, if you're recommending lifetime care 1 year at a time, which you can still do, that there's going to be blocks of visits within that timeline that are covered by Medicare and paid for, and the patient doesn't have to pay out of pocket. Now, depending on the patient's condition and how many of those flare-ups or ouch forms they fill out, that you have to customize. It's not going to be a cookie cutter approach. It's going to depend on each patient's circumstances and their condition as to how many active visits they have and how many wellness visits they have during the course of that time frame. Okay. And you'll need to determine that when you're setting up the patient's care plan from the beginning, based on the extent of their condition and their overall examination. This is how many visits I'm anticipating that they'll roughly need for active care. This is how many visits I'm estimating that they'll roughly need for maintenance care. And then you set up the care plan accordingly and bill for the appropriate visits with active care, and those will be reimbursed. Okay, so that's the Medicare piece. And if you have questions, you can let me know. Let's shift over to the Medicaid or Medi-Cal. Now, I know not all of you provide care for Medicaid and Medi-Cal. In California, it's called Medi-Cal. I enjoy it because historically, Medi-Cal covered children. They covered 2 visits a month for anyone under the age of 18. It didn't even have to be an active diagnosis. It just had to be diagnosed appropriately. And they specifically wanted the diagnosis of subluxation, 2 visits a month for kids, ongoing. That's great. I love it. That was about the closest to wellness or maintenance we could get to help and encourage children to grow up with healthy spines and good alignment and healthy nervous systems. More recently, in recent years, the parameters of Medi-Cal in the state of California have changed. So in in California now, Medi-Cal has coverage for ages above 17 years old. So they actually cover adults now all the way up through Medi-Cal. Qualifying for Medicare, right? So it's adults now. Now there has to be financial limitations. There has to be some hardships financially in order for a person to qualify for Medi-Cal or Medicaid. But if they do qualify, it's not limited to minors anymore. It's actually inclusive of all ages up until Medicare. So that being said, for those of us who are in county, and it's county specific. So you'll want to check with your local county and see what the Medi-Cal and Medicaid parameters are for those of you who are in California. Check with your county and see what those parameters are. Usually they'll have a liaison is not the right word, but a person that is like your contact, your point of contact, a representative that you can contact and reach out to, and you can develop a good relationship with them. Her name is Maribel, and she's in Santa Cruz County where I practice. So I know that I can call Maribel with questions and clarifications, and she's great about that. So if you want to find out who your contact is, you can do that, and then you can pose these questions. But here's the point of all this. Because the Medi-Cal restrictions have changed, we now have the opportunity to see patients of all ages within Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal covers ordinarily 2 visits a month. Now there's a new change, and that is that with a referral from their primary doctor, there's an additional block of visits that can be applied and covered for that patient. So it's a change that's happening. It's a lot of fun because we get to take care of people who are, financially challenged or maybe having a hardship in life. We can provide chiropractic care. It's covered through their Medi-Cal benefits, and through a referral from their primary doctor, it can be expanded to cover more, and that's pretty easy. And there's one last piece to this whole cherry on top, and that is that it's a great way for you to develop relationships with your local medical doctors, right? If you can get to know them, they know who you are, they know that you take Medi-Cal or Medicaid, that you're willing to take care of those patients that are having hard circumstances. They love that. And since in the last few years, there's been a lot more interest and desire in the general population to seek out more natural forms of healthcare as opposed to pharmaceutically based forms of healthcare, especially coming out of the opioid crisis. A lot of people are really gun shy about taking opioids or anything related to pills for pain. So anyone with chronic pain qualifies for these benefits, and a lot of the primary doctors are happy to refer their patients to a chiropractor because the patients are demanding, I don't want any more pills or drugs, doc. I want something natural. And then that steers them right into your office, and away you go. Okay. So I know that was a lot on insurance forms today, but as I said, I think that sort of adds those two pieces on top: Medicare, Medi-Cal, and you can look into your local counties and see what the benefits are for you or your practice. And with that, as always, I love to say hello to Dr. Knich. So Dr. John, I see you on the call. Why don't I say hello? If you don't mind opening up your line, then that would be great.
Hey, Scott, a lot of good content on this call.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to re-listen to this a couple times.
Fantastic. It is. It's a great topic. It's important. And I don't know if you noticed earlier, but I was looking out my window and I just happened to notice there's a patient that I take care of, and he walked right by my window outside my office as I was talking to you. And he's somebody who's really hard up. He's homeless, really has a great head on his shoulders as far as trying to get back on his feet. He was addicted to opioids. He's not anymore. And he just walked by my office, and it's just a great guy. And I appreciate being able to help him get back on his feet and get off the street. And he's been clean and sober and ambitious. And so it's just a great example of what we can do with chiropractic care.
Yes, it is fantastic. The humanness of our profession.
Yes, absolutely. Any questions I can answer?
No, but we will be re-listening to this as a group for sure.
All right, great. And I see your team on the call. So welcome, everybody,
Nice.
and keep up the good work.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
All right. And I'm sure that Dr. Knich is probably sitting on the beach under a palm tree right now while his team is going for it back at the office. And I'm obviously just kidding. I know you guys work really hard together. So anyways, for everybody though, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up a little early. I don't see any hands up for questions. Dr. Davis, I see you on the call. Welcome. And Dr. Marsh, Daniel Marsh, welcome to the call. It's great to see you on the call. And but I'm going to jump off a little early. If there's any questions at any time, just email me, dctrainings@gmail.com. And I'm happy to help and wish you all great success in your practice, taking care of your patients and utilizing those insurance benefits where they apply. Thanks again, and I will talk to you next week.
If you would like to become a member of DC Trainings, be sure to head on over to dctrainings.com to get started today.